Great. Welcome back, everyone. I hope you enjoyed the 10-minute break that we had. And it is 2:30, so we're going to go ahead and move on to the second part of today's presentation. So I hope everyone is feeling refreshed. I want you to take a moment to just check in with yourself. And I want you to ask yourself, are you feeling better prepared for another hour of training? And to consider whether you feel more prepared than if we had not taken a break. If you do feel more prepared because of this break, I encourage you to remember this feeling and to consider it, and to consider giving newcomers a short break when an intake interview is taking over an hour, and incorporating that into your service delivery as well. Okay, so now that we know what cultural orientation is and have background on resettlement services available to Afghan families, as well as understand some of the social and cultural considerations we should apply to our services, let's now discuss how you fit into all of this. So we'll do that by talking about how you can integrate key cultural orientation messages into your services. So first, I want to learn more about the services you deliver. So using the chat box, can you share just a few brief words that describe a typical intake meeting? So for example, how long is it? What does it include? If you can describe that to me in your own words in the chat box, please. Great, thank you, Jennifer. So intake meetings usually take an hour. You ask personal questions. Does everyone agree that they tend to take an hour? What if you have an interpreter? Is it still 1 hour? It includes an interview, reviewing documents, assuming that includes immigration status documents. The times can vary. It typically involves discussions around household financial management, questions about income, resources, employment, anywhere from 45 to 60 minutes. Talking about housing, it can take twice as long with an interpreter, someone says, so perhaps as long as 2 hours. Well, thank you all for sharing. Please keep including some examples. It's helpful for us to understand intake interviews as well from your perspective. So before I provide some key cultural orientation messages for you to integrate into a typical intake meeting, let's first review 4 tips for effective service delivery. So first, be trauma informed. Consider the current events that led to the family's displacement. The trauma of seeing their country change, the trauma of unwillingly leaving their home, and the trauma of not knowing the fate of their friends and family they left behind. These traumas are still fresh. The wounds have not yet healed, and the process of their evacuation may not have given them the space to properly grieve and cope with these leave traumas. Secondly, be culturally sensitive. So be mindful of different communication styles. American culture is still very new, so don't force American customs onto newcomers. For example, as Nick had described earlier, if you're a Mail County Assistance Office staff member and you extend your hand to greet someone, perhaps an Afghan woman won't feel comfortable shaking your hand. So instead, consider an alternative greeting method or ask, what's a common greeting in your country? Third, take a strengths-based approach. Make the effort to teach rather than do. Easier for us to do something ourselves, especially when we feel rushed first time. So instead, make the effort to show newcomers how to accomplish certain tasks on their own. For example, show newcomers from Afghanistan how to fill out the change of income form. The amount of paperwork that newcomers receive during their first months is so overwhelming. This will provide them the confidence that's needed to fill out and send these forms to you when they start working or have any other changes of addresses. And fourth, provide gender equitable services. So include both males and females in the conversation. Once you identify the family's native language, call an interpreter for translation services, which I understand all of you are already doing, and avoid only speaking to the English-speaking husband or using husband as an interpreter. Instead, ask both males and females pointed, open-ended questions to ensure they both understand all of their rights and responsibilities. And I see a few comments in the chat. We have Sharon who says, immigration status and documents are a confusing topic for most. The new arrivals don't know what is needed. We usually ask them to give us everything that they have, and we then weed through them to determine their current status. That's a great kind of comment for us to expand upon. So I'll ask Manara to jot it down so we could touch upon some strategies you might be able to use during the Q&A session. And we have Risat, usually putting your heart and bowing can be an alternative greeting. Thank you, Risat, for adding that. So there are 4 key cultural orientation messages related to employment that you can incorporate into your service delivery. These messages are included in the objectives and indicators for cultural orientation that I explained earlier. So first, there are responsibilities associated with the types of assistance you receive, such as attending a job readiness class. Second, employment is not guaranteed by the government. You play a central role in obtaining employment in the United States. Third, you are expected to accept the first job offered to you, even if it is not in your chosen profession. And fourth, the desire to continue formal education should be weighed against the need to work. Adult education can be expensive in the US. For many newcomers, the best option may be time while going to school part-time or recertifying their overseas credentials. So some newcomers you meet will have college degrees and they may want work jobs similar as they held in Afghanistan. It's important that you relay the message that not all overseas credentials are recognized in the US, and the recertification process can take a very long time. They will need to be open to accepting entry-level jobs that will allow them to afford their household expenses. So you can learn more about the recertification process services, which has information specific to degrees from Afghanistan as well, in addition to types of programs that are available to newcomers from Afghanistan. So now one more cultural orientation topic, which is money management. There are 4 key cultural orientation messages related to money management that you can also incorporate into your service delivery. The first is that newcomers should know their total income and expenses, including rent and utilities. So try not to answer those questions for them, but make sure that both spouses or all adult members of the family understand that. Newcomers should identify that public assistance is limited and need to work to earn income. Third, all employable adults in the household may have to work in order to meet their finances. So it might not be enough to have one income earner in a household to afford things like rent, especially in more expensive cities. Fourth, newcomers understand the concept of withholdings on paychecks. So withholdings include the money that's taken out for taxes like Social Security, etc. So both spouses in a family may not want to work. This may be due to the cultural considerations that were shared earlier, or because childcare is very expensive in the United States. So like all Americans, need to make these decisions, newcomers will also need to decide what is right for their family. Next, I'll share a culturally sensitive approach to engaging in conversation with newcomers. So when delivering key cultural orientation messages, avoid reading through a list like the one I just shared and what I just did with you. So instead, engage newcomers through a sense-based approach. You can ask open-ended questions and engage in an interactive conversation. The following script I'm going to go over is an example of how to deliver the key cultural orientation message that all employable adults should practice work. Okay, so you can begin by asking newcomers who will work in your household. What are the advantages of both men and women working? Are there potential disadvantages? I'm sure right now you are asking during your regular intake, who's going to work? But you can expand upon that, talking about why did you make that decision by asking what are the advantages if both of you work? Are there disadvantages if both of you are working? You can then draw upon the key cultural orientation messages that I've provided here to continue the conversation. Again, you don't need to type this down. We will be sharing them after the presentation. But again, avoid reading through these key messages. Instead, use the key messages as a guide to continue the conversation with newcomers. In your conversation, try to exercise patience and understanding, and just remember that American culture is new to these families and they have a lot of lived trauma that they are still coping with. And finally, after initial conversation, you can provide more details about the employment program or the job readiness training that is required for newcomers to attend for them to receive public assistance. So explain, you will be enrolled in blank employment program if that's part of your intake interview. However, employment is not guaranteed by the government or your service provider. It may take weeks or months to find a job, and you may have several job interviews. You play a central role in finding and keeping a job. You should be prepared to pursue employment right away. So just in those 3 sentences, I've incorporated multiple components of the key cultural orientation messages that I shared on both sides. So now I'm going to read a scenario. Afterward, I'd like you to reflect on what you would say or do in the scenario. Then once you're ready, please share your responses in the chat box. So the scenario is a family of 6 arrives to your office to enroll in service. They say they are humanitarian parolees from Afghanistan and they speak Persian. They say they recently arrived to Erie from a safe haven, Texas, and have not received any services from a local resettlement agency. What would you do? Drawing upon everything that you've learned so far in today's training, what would you do? You can type your answers in the chat box, or feel free to unmute yourself as well if you want to respond verbally. So we have Elizabeth saying to get a translator. And when you call that translator, Elizabeth, what language are you asking for? Persian. Persian. So we have a few people asking Persian. And I don't know if we have Nick or Reese on the line, if you want to jump in and give another explanation about language considerations for Afghan populations.
Yeah, one thing is really I've seen clearly. As an interpreter, I worked recently in one of the camps, resettlement camps, and while Dari is a branch of Persian, and to be more clearly, the reason they call it Dari is because Dari comes from the word, as you can see, it's sort of like a loyal. Basically means the royal. And Dari is as you can see, the crema of the Persian language. So it's sort of like a harder to speak. So if you do get a Persian translator, there might be an issue of them having a difficulty communicating with the client, because while Dari is a Persian language, um, their vocabulary and their accent have sort of like drifted as the time has passed away. So it'd be better if we can get a Dari interpreter for them.
Thank you, Risat, for that insight. Yes, so I did skillfully add that into the scenario so we could have another conversation about it. I mean, everyone is going to come across this in your work, is trying to figure out what language should I get on the interpretation line. And it's really important that if someone's saying I speak Persian, that you attempt to clarify that and say, speak Dari. Should I call a Dari interpreter or should I call a Pashto interpreter? And we encourage you to try Dari first. And if you're still having communication issues when an interpreter gets on the line, it might be because they really meant Pashto. Great. Any other insights on what someone would do in this specific scenario? So not only do we know they were from Afghanistan, they spoke Persian, but we know that they came to US-based safe haven, the one in Texas, and they have not received any services from a resettlement agency and they're humanitarian parolees. So is there anything else you would say or do? Angela, I love that. Welcome them and let them know you're here to help. It's very wonderful. It's really helpful to encourage a greeting, introduce yourself at the time you're meeting with someone. Offer them local community resources for refugees or multicultural in particular. Great, and we'll talk about some of the multicultural resources that you can offer to them as well. Information on local resettlement services, perfect. Are they assisted by a resettlement agency? Wonderful, that is perfect to know. With this group, you might be hearing, I'm not connected with a resettlement agency because they are humanitarian parolees, they arrive from a safe haven, saying that they're not receiving services. So you're gonna want to ask, are you connected to a resettlement agency? Maybe your expectations are very high and the resettlement agency is able to respond to them because this is the highest number of arrivals that they are dealing with in a very long time and can provide limited services? Or is it that they independently departed a base and don't know where the resettlement agency is? If it's the latter, it's important that you give them the information so they can see if they can get services. But it's also important to remember that it's not guaranteed. So don't tell them that it's guaranteed the resettlement agency will be able to help them. Perfect. So move on to the last section of today's presentation before we start the Q&A panel session. So I'm going to introduce you to CORE's resources that you can share with families from Afghanistan. Newcomers can access CORE's multilingual resources through a website, a mobile app, and social media. So CORE's resources include the CORE Resettlement Navigator, the Settle In mobile and desktop app, and Settle In Facebook. These resources are available in English, Arabic, Burmese, Dari, Kinyarwandin, Spanish, Swahili, and Russian. Again, you don't need to memorize that list. I'm going to show you where it's available, and it's available on the flyer for these as well. So before Operation Allies Welcome, CORE's resources were not available in Pashto. Neither the CORE Resettlement Navigator or the Settle In mobile and desktop app are currently available in Pashto. CORE is in the process of translating the CORE Resettlement Navigator into Pashto. To learn when these resources are available in Pashto, you can sign up to receive updates from CORE from our website. Following this call, I will be sending you out translated flyers for all free resources that you can use when introducing newcomers to course resources. So be sure to explore those resources yourselves before introducing them so that it will help you answer any questions that arise. Okay, so give me a moment while I pivot to a different screen, and I'm going to show you what these resources look like. Okay, so right now I have up the Core Resettlement Navigator. So using videos, podcasts, and fact sheets, the Core Resettlement Navigator provides newcomers with clear and vital U.S. resettlement and cultural orientation information in an engaging and interactive way. So I pulled up the website here so you can see it from the user's perspective. Since we are a English-speaking group and this presentation rather is being delivered in English, I will navigate to the English version of this. You will see two categories, which is the United States Refugee Admissions Program, so information about that, which is targeted to newcomers who are still overseas, and then Cultural Orientation for Refugees, which is targeting newcomers who are in the United States. So I'm going to open this one on the right, which pertains to kind of the population that we're talking about today at the time when they're meeting you in your office or online. So we have all the top cultural orientation topics listed here, which each provide different types of information. I'm going to navigate to the employment resources right now. And you can see here that we have information on two topics, generally on employment in the US and employment for refugee women, as well as some information here on finding a job, work culture in the United States, employment rights and responsibilities, and some frequently asked questions that you had all posted at the beginning of the call when I asked you what common questions you might hear. So how will I get a job? Will I receive help getting my job? So continuing our conversation about dual income households and the importance of both spouses potentially working in a home, I'll navigate to the Employment for Refugee Women core resources. So you'll see here that we have a fact sheet, which you can navigate under read, a podcast, which is under listen, and a video, which is under watch. All of these have the same scripts. So the fact sheet that you see when I access here is the same script and wording as what you're going to see when I click watch, which is an interactive video. While this is in English, you're going to see it is also available in the following languages. So if you're trying to play a video for someone, you might not be able to navigate the written language for Dari to have chosen Dari on the first page, but if you just navigate the portal in English, once you're at the resource you want to share, you would be able to switch it to Dari. So I'm going to show about 20 seconds of this video so you can get an idea of what CORE's resources look like. One moment while I reshare.
The position in the society. My husband was working alone, and it was hard for him to manage everything. I started job in a hotel as a receptionist, and I liked my job. It was a good job. Now we are happy here.
When both spouses work, the household income increases, making it easier to afford such expenses as monthly bills and rent, as well as food and clothing. A double income also enables you to save money and increase your family's financial security.
My name is Katam.
So that is an example of one of the videos. You can see that those are people who have a lived refugee experience who are talking on the video. We also have animated videos on different components of the CoreNet website. So next, I'm going to navigate to the Settle In mobile and desktop app. This is the perfect travel companion for newcomers during their resettlement journey to the United States. It provides short videos, interactive lessons, and badges to reward and track learning progress. So you can see it is available on the App Store as well as on Google Play. I'm going to navigate to the desktop app because I am on my laptop right now, so I can show you what it will look like. So you could see we have information on COVID-19 here. That information includes translated videos and animated videos that will direct you back to the Core Resettlement Navigator website. We have different cultural orientation topics such as resettlement basics, your resettlement agency, working in the United States, housing, money management, learning English, health and hygiene. I'm going to click on health and hygiene because my understanding is that in addition to enrolling people in public assistance programs and cash assistance programs, you also enroll them in refugee medical assistance. So health and hygiene is definitely another cultural orientation topic that you could integrate into your services if there is time. So I'll go into the US healthcare system portion of this so you can see what it looks like. Give me a moment because it's memorizing my activity of going through this lesson. So we're kind of switched back to the quiz after the information that was shared. But you can see that after you learn certain information on the cultural orientation topic, it will ask individuals to complete a quiz that will reinforce the information that they just learned. So the quiz questions will show differently. This one says, who can help disabled refugees access health care? And then you click which ones apply and it will provide additional information. We can continue to the next lesson so you could see what the information portion of this desktop and mobile app will look like. So we'll continue to the lesson, seeing a doctor, managing your care. So it gives information about healthcare in the United States. What is routine healthcare? Examples of routine healthcare. What is urgent healthcare? Examples of urgent health problems, healthcare at home, going to a doctor, etc. So you can navigate this on your own time to see what it looks like. This is also available in all the languages that I showed you. So when you go to settings, you click language, you'll be able to choose a different language if it's needed. When you log on for the first time, you'll choose the language. Since I've already enrolled and set English as my preference, that's why it's being showed that way right now. And lastly, I'm going to show you Settle in Facebook. So Settle in Facebook is designed to directly engage newcomers from Afghanistan resettling in the United States. This platform serves as another touch point for CORE to directly disseminate essential, correct information tied to initial resettlement services and key cultural orientation messages. So this resource is available in Dari and Pashto. So you could see it's on the social media platform, Facebook. Not many posts are in English. It is in Dari and Pashto. We have a team of digital content managers on CORE's staff who manage this. So not only do they make sure that every comment on their post is responded to, but they also make sure that people can send direct messages to us when they have questions about services or cultural orientation topics primarily, and they can provide additional information. So you could see here a post that was done recently that's posted in both Dari and Pashto. And this is about information about the new strain of the COVID-19 virus, what people can do, information about vaccines. If we go to the comment section, people type in their comments in their native language, and then one of our staff members will respond if they have a question. So it's really a great platform because we do everything in our capability to make sure everyone's questions receive a response. Perfect. Okay, so as a reminder, those resources that are available for newcomers in their languages is the Core Resettlement Navigator, the Settle In mobile and desktop app, and Settle In Facebook. These flyers will be provided to you in English, in Dari, and in Pashto when the resource is available in Pashto. So finally, when deciding whether to share CORE's resources with a newcomer, you should consider the following two questions. Does the newcomer have a smartphone? And is CORE's resource available in the newcomer's native language? If you can answer yes to both questions, connect their smartphone to Wi-Fi if it's available, then do the following. Pull up CORE's Resettlement Navigator on their preferred browser, download the Settle In mobile app to their device, and ask them to pull up their Facebook page to follow Settle In Facebook. So if the newcomer does not have a smartphone, but the resources are available in their native languages, I encourage you to give them the flyers to Core Resettlement Navigator, the Settle In mobile app, and Settle In Facebook. So that ends the presentation part of today's call. For the remainder of today's training, we're going to open it up to questions from County Assistance Office staff. We'll begin by circling back to any questions from earlier today that we didn't answer, and we invite you now to post any additional questions in the chat or raise your hand and wait to be called on if you prefer to voice your question verbally. So I will now pass it over to my colleague Manar, who's going to lead the Q&A panel session.
Thank you very much, Tiana, and everybody for presenting today. We had a comment earlier that I'm going to relay. Related to immigration status. So one of the participants mentioned that immigration status and documents are a confusing topic for most. The new arrivals don't know what is needed. We usually ask them to give us everything that they have, and we then weed through them to determine their current status. And that was a comment related to what do you do with clients during the meeting. We talked earlier that we're going to go back to address this question or this comment because that is something that is going to happen. It's not going to be an isolated incident. It might happen more times. So that is a great strategy, specifically in the beginning. And if the clients do not speak English, if both of them do not speak English, and even when both or one of them speaks English, in the beginning, if they're not sure about their what their status is, what I would recommend in this situation is showing them which document has their status identified on it and pointing it that this is an important document that they need to be aware of, and discussing that status with them so that they are aware that that is their status, because it will affect what kinds of services they will be able to access and also their future resettlement in the US. But I encourage anybody who has any other ideas on how to address this situation, please feel free to unmute yourself and share from your experience. If not, I have some questions for you that I'm going to share verbally and in the chat. So our first question to you that I just posted in the chat is, in your professional experience, can you describe a time when you experienced a cultural misunderstanding with a newcomer from Afghanistan? In your description, please explain the misunderstanding and how you addressed it. All right, I see a comment from Leila. A very good question. What if the clients do not have documentation with proof of immigration status? Usually, if they leave, when they leave the base or the safe haven, they will have documentations with them, because before they leave, they receive counseling and they receive documents. The whatever documents they were processed in the safe haven, they will be given those documents. Leila, have you encountered the situation where people showed up without proof of immigration status?
Yes, so hi, my name is Leila Drusno. I'm from National Audit Service Center Resettlement Agency in Philadelphia. Hi. So what we're coming across is that we have many Afghan arrivals and many Afghan evacuees that are coming in with limited documentation. The majority of them do have one thing. Sometimes the only thing that they have would be the receipt of their application for the employment authorization document. So we have come across this multiple times, that is the only thing they have on hand. Sometimes people don't have passports. Sometimes they only have Afghan issued ID that doesn't have a word in English. And we do have to work with the county assistance office to provide these documents to them and for the verification of immigration status. And that can be challenging if we do have people who lose those as well. Or people say they never were given it, or maybe they were, who knows what happened. But when they're coming to us, we do face this issue of lack of documentation. If there is no passport, there is no document where it's stamped that it says you're a parolee. Or sometimes there is a date of birth that was entered incorrectly, for example, during processing on the basis, and then their I-94 doesn't come up through the CBP portal. So we're running into those issues, and that is still ongoing. So I know that the whole program is, evolving as we go, but these are issues that we're commonly coming across with, and we're dealing with internally. We're trying to find other ways. We're going to our national, trying to find out how they can help. And also county assistance offices there as well are being challenged with the same issue. And they would ask us as a resettlement agency to provide those additional documents, but we very often do not, clients don't have them. And there are delays with processing employment authorization documents through IOM for us to be receiving with their people that arrived over 2 months from today, or even more so sometimes. So if there are any discrepancies that happen during the application, there are those delays as well. So yes, we certainly are coming across into
All right. Thank you for sharing.
issues.
That's very helpful, and I want to highlight one thing you mentioned, is that you reach out to your national agency and see how they can help. That's very helpful. Definitely, they will be able to provide resources and ways in which that you can access those documents. Another way is, and I don't know if this is going to be applicable to the county assistance workers, is USCIS will definitely have those documents. Whoever comes to the US, whoever came through the Operations Allies Welcome, was processed by USCIS at some point. So they must have documents somewhere. The question becomes is like, how do I get to the source that issued or is processing those documents at this point? Tiana, do you want to add anything?
I just want to add, this isn't, necessarily helpful to getting the documents, but I want you to recall the context that we provided of this situation. And we're talking about 100,000 people that went through a instantaneous evacuation for safety, individuals who were allies to the Afghan military for the last few decades. And there have definitely been issues with receiving some of these documents. A lot of it has to do with the knowledge of where people are going to be. So my understanding is that some of those issues we had earlier on during the evacuation process and the resettlement process of where EAD cards, for example, were being sent have since been resolved. So at this point, it's really on an individual basis of what families might be experiencing of where their documents were received. One thing is that if someone was connected with IOM and connected with a local resettlement agency and said that they're going to receive resettlement services in this city, and they choose to voluntarily or independently depart a safe haven to a different city, there's definitely going to be address mishaps that happen and some difficulties that occur in getting that documentation. But I don't think that's any longer the norm, but it's definitely something to continue to relay the information to national resettlement agencies who are able to relay it to the government so they can take that into account during the remaining processing right now that's happening at the safe havens.
Thank you, Tiana. And again, exactly, this is a situation that will continue to happen. So it's very important to exercise patience, ask questions, maybe ask them which address they said they wanted their documents to be sent to. And if you're connected with the resettlement agency, figure out who at the resettlement agency who can help you. And then for resettlement agency staff is to connect with USCIS and find out where in the process they are with specific someone's documents. Thank you so much, Leila, for raising an important point. Going back, anybody has any other questions before I go back to the question I posed earlier? I'll take silence as a no. So the first question that I posted earlier is, in your professional experience from the work that you have been doing with all the clients that come through your door, can you describe a time when you experienced a cultural misunderstanding with newcomers from Afghanistan? In your description, please explain the misunderstanding and how you addressed it. So what happened? What led to the misunderstanding? And how did you solve the issue? And I just want to preface this by saying this is pretty normal. Miscommunication or cultural misunderstanding is going to likely happen, and it happens a lot. Even if you have a friend or a coworker from another city or from another background, there might be some cultural misunderstandings. So can you share how you have been able to navigate those situations? And in the meantime, I'm going to post our next question to prepare you.
Manar, I can jump in. I'd really love to hear from some of the staff at the local resettlement agency in Pennsylvania as well. But as I had stated at the beginning of the presentation, I did provide direct services to families from Afghanistan for about 5 years in the state of Maryland and Virginia, and a few people in the DC area as well. So I think drawing from that experience, one of the misconceptions that I had experienced was related to healthcare and the idea that healthcare information was not confidential to the person who was sharing it, and that family members could access their medical information. And this led to some reluctancy to have really important medical conversations in the fear that family members would have access to that information. So I think one thing that's really helpful is to describe HIPAA laws in the United States. When you look at the health objectives and indicators that CORE has come up with on our website, you'll see that we encourage people to talk about confidentiality by the medical profession and to get people to understand that medical information cannot and will not be shared with people in their family unless they give expressed permission. And to kind of piggyback off that point, this is also why it's so important to call licensed interpreters, because we want to avoid spouses interpreting for each other, especially when it comes to the discussing of sensitive information that they may not want to share with one another. So the last thing we want to see, of course, is a spouse being used in the medical profession for interpretation, because it would violate someone's confidentiality. So someone knowing these rights that they have in the US can help them make decisions that can enable them to get the healthcare that they need in the future.
Thank you very much, Tiana. Our next question for you is, what are some examples of cultural and social considerations we discussed today that can vary greatly between newcomers from Afghanistan? And that, just going back to the presentation that Nick and Riyasat gave us earlier. So for example, what are some differences in religious practices or family dynamics that you have professionally experienced? I can also chime in from my background, working with indirect service for refugees, and I specifically also worked a lot of the times with clients from Afghanistan. One of the main things that I realized very soon, and I was aware of, is that it was not a good idea to stereotype and overgeneralize. So I had clients where the wife was the one who spoke fluent English and the husband did not speak any English, and vice versa. I had situations where the husband was very encouraging of his wife to go to school, learn English, and in other situations where the wife really wanted to do that and was pushing for that. So like, again, thinking through that, it is very important to go into these conversations with an open mind and know that there are different considerations and different backgrounds, and each case and each family will be different. And I encourage you to review what we posted earlier, which is the Afghan Backgrounder, which was developed by professionals from Afghanistan about the Afghan culture, and it highlights the diversity in education and cultural norms among Afghans themselves. My third question to you is,
Before we move
sorry,
on to the third
yes.
question, Manar, I can jump in with kind of something else that you're going to see a great deal of variance across the population. And I think that's in religious practices. The Afghan community is primarily Muslim practicing individuals, and you can see the way they practice their religion vary drastically from family to family. So some understandings of what you might have on how the Muslim religion is practiced may not apply to all families. One thing that's common from the perspective of employment is that you might hear people who don't want to touch pork, or they don't want to be in an environment that serves alcohol because of their religion. So when you're having conversations around employment, you may hear those restrictions. And it's important to realize that those are religious-based restrictions. But you shouldn't presume, first of all, that every Afghan family you work with is Muslim, and that every family that practices the religion does not want to work in an environment with pork and alcohol. So those are two things you may hear a lot when talking about employment, but it's still best to always ask the families if this applies to them.
Thank you very much, Tiana. Very important point, specifically as you're helping people get jobs. Not assuming what they will be or will not be okay with is very important, and it might make your job a lot easier. My third question to you is, I am posting it right now. So besides cow benefits, which is the TANF, the SNAP, the Refugee Medical Assistance, what are other state or federal programs that Afghan clients can benefit from? When describing those programs, please address how newcomers begin the application process and explain whether any of those applications can occur by cow staff, for instance, housing and childcare programs. And your answer here is going to be educational to all of us because not all of us know uh, the full length of services that you offer. I see a comment from Elizabeth. Um, do you want to read your comment to us and unmute yourself, Elizabeth?
Sure, I can.
Thank you.
Verification of disability status is sometimes required to show that an adult household member is unable to participate in an employment and training program. From the statements made during this training, it sounds like this is something that's regarded as a deeply personal / private topic in Afghan culture. So I'm wondering if I have that correct. I think you said we should talk about mental well-being rather than mental health problems, for example, though of course disability can be much more expansive than that, and that we should ask medical questions one-on-one rather than say in front of both a husband and wife at the same time. Do you have any other recommendations for explaining that policy or sort of navigating the cultural difference there?
I will, yes. Can Riyasat please respond to the first part of the question about having a disability is considered, whether it is considered a deeply personal, private topic in Afghan culture, and then I can join afterwards.
Yeah, thank you, Manar. So I think obviously, I mean, the first thing would come, what is the definition of disability? I think even, living in the US for a while now, even I don't know what encompasses disability a lot of time. A lot of time mental issues can be also considered as a mental, I mean, as a disability. So I think one thing would really help is then if you could sort of like talk to them about what uh, legally, is considered as a disability. And I think second one is that even though, yes, I mean, socially, even in US, I mean, obviously, we don't want to talk about mental health issues in own environment, but if it is for verification purposes, I mean, Afghans are actually pretty open about it. If you want to tell them that, hey, this is because of the, I guess, because of the bureaucratic process, we need to know a bit more about your condition. I think most of them would be open to tell you because since it is tied to a lot of benefits, and I mean, there's a, I guess, incentive in terms of talking about the issue. Um, yeah, thank you.
Manar, you're muted.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Thank you, Riyasat. That's very important. Providing definitions and legal definitions is always very helpful for people to understand what is required from them. And I agree with you, the concept of disability varies, and sometimes mental health issues can be considered as a disability, some of them. In terms of discussing mental health, I think one of the main things we discussed earlier is instead of talking about mental health, talking about emotional health, because the word mental health can, in some cultures, even in the US, can insinuate that the person is not normal. So we do not want to run this risk. And the most important thing is to start talking about how you're doing. Sometimes asking just this question, how are you doing? And in a lot of cultures, when you ask somebody, how are you doing? they will respond very honestly instead of saying, well, I'm good, thanks, how are you, you know? So that's an important point. In terms of discussing these matters separately, because these are very deeply personal, our feelings are very personal, it is important to address those with sensitivity, and if possible, have separate conversations, because sometimes in when there is tension, because of the stress is that people are going through, the newcomers is massive, sometimes tensions can happen within the spouses, between the spouses, and they may not feel very comfortable discussing those tensions or stressors in front of the other spouse. So that's why it is important to discuss those separately in order to get an honest answer without feeling the judgment, pressure, etc. I hope that was helpful. I know we are at time. So what I want to do right now, I would like to share with you our survey that we would like you to fill out. So please bear with me for a second. So this is the survey. Please click on it. You can also scan the QR code to fill out the survey. We want to thank you very much for attending our training. Like I said, our survey is going to take no more than 5 minutes. So please complete the survey in order to help CORE improve our training delivery and identify additional resources to support community partners with cultural orientation delivery. As a reminder, we will send you an email with the information reviewed today. And thank you again for joining our call.
Great. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your time and a nice presentation and training. So we will definitely share our fill up the survey and share our understanding from our viewpoints.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your time and the training.
Thanks, Susan. We will stay for a couple more minutes on the line for any final comments or questions, and then we will end the call afterwards.
Hi, this is Keith Heffley here. I just wanted to thank you for a great presentation, and like I said, thank everyone for attending who was able to, and you know, especially thank you all for, you know, we've had Afghan newcomers coming in for quite a while now, so all the CAO staff who have you know, have been participating in helping them, you know, settle in. I just want to, you know, thank you for all your efforts so far for that.
Wonderful. Well, I hope everyone has a great rest of their day.
Thanks again.
Bye.